House. Thank you for coming tonight to the speaker series with the St. Augustine Historical Society and Lifelong Learning. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening. I'm Shelley Gazer, I'm the director of the Lifelong Learning Program, and we've had this partnership, or the partnership with the St. Augustine Historical Society for about 3 years now. So it's wonderful to have the speaker tonight, Casey Wooster. And Megan Altus from the Historical Society, the executive director, is going to introduce our speaker. So enjoy the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Before I get started, we will have one more talk this year to round out the year, and that's going to be Dr. Tom Graham on December 8th. And some exciting news about that. He'll be talking about his new book, The Men on the Monument. And we just got that book in this week. So if you are a Historical Society member, please look forward to getting that in the mail in the coming weeks.
Oh, wow.
Exciting.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're very excited about that. But tonight we have a very special guest. Born and raised in Central Florida, Casey Wooster is a cultural heritage professional passionate about telling her home stories. A graduate of the University of Florida, she has worked for nonprofits, museums, and libraries throughout the Southeast. For the past 3 years, she has served as a trustee for the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Society, spreading awareness of Rawlings and her work. Like Rawlings, Casey shares a love for the scrub and is an avid hiker. Currently, she calls St. Augustine home and works for the St. Johns County Public Library System and Flagler College. Let's give a warm welcome for Casey Wooster.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you all for coming. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Just gonna start. I am getting over being sick, so please bear with me. That was my one caveat. Also, I want to know before I get started, I assume you all know who that is?
Yes.
Okay. That'll save me a lot, because I told someone that, I asked someone, I mentioned this to a friend the other day, and he was like, I have no clue who you're talking about. And I was like, okay. Let's see. Also learning. Okay, there we go, perfect. All right, since I don't really have to introduce her, she doesn't really need much introduction. She's very famous, or at least somewhat famous. Her name is Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. She's known for being an author. She moved to Florida in 1928 and to a small hamlet called Cross Creek. Have any of y'all been there? Yeah, it's still pretty darn small. Yeah, she moved there. She moved with her husband, Chuck, who also wanted to be a writer. They thought, buying an orange grove would just pay for itself, and they would have all this free time to write and inspiration. Well, she did get a lot of inspiration, but she didn't get quite as much free time as she would have liked. Managing an orange grove is actually a lot of work. So anyway, it ended up providing a lot of inspiration. She did find time to write, and she ended up writing a couple of things that became really popular, and we'll talk about them here in a little bit. But anyway, why I say she's so famous, or should be better known, is from 1933 until her death in the 50s, she was one of Scribner's top-selling authors. She was a protege of the famed editor, I don't know if you've heard of him, Maxwell Perkins. Her colleagues or her peers would have been people like F. Scott Fitzgerald, which y'all have probably heard of, and Ernest Hemingway. So she had a lot of great colleagues, I should say, and some of them friends. Actually, most of them drinking friends, for sure. So she should be better known. Those names are known throughout the country. Everyone reads The Great Gatsby in school these days. Early, not so much, but Ernest Hemingway is still very famous. So why she's not as well remembered, that's a whole nother conversation. But just wanted to start there, that she should be better remembered, and she is pretty darn well remembered for her time in Cross Creek. Not so much her ties to St. Augustine. But anyway, before she came to St. Augustine anyways, St. Augustine made it into her work. She published her first novel, South Moon Under. Has anyone read it? Okay, it's been called like the Huck Finn, but for Florida. I admit I have not read it. I'm gonna be honest, not gonna give you a summary because I have not read it. But in it, I do know St. Augustine gets mentioned. That much I do know. But anyway, this was her first book. It was very popular. It very much put her on the map. And as I mentioned, St. Augustine does get mentioned. The Castillo comes up. This is a little bit, I am not going to repeat it because it is she wrote in vernacular, and some of it is a little dated. But she talks about the Castillo and St. Augustine. It comes up in her book. And so begins our lecture. She then follows up with the Yearling in 1938. This one, everyone, I think, how many have read it? Okay, see, this one she's better known for. Most people, if they've read Rawlings, they have read this. I admit, I have read this. That was a tough one to read. If you love animals, it's a tough read. But anyway, she wrote the Yearling in 1938. It won the Pulitzer Prize. Anyway, it's set in the scrub, it's set in Central Florida, so you would not think that there's a lot of ties to St. Augustine. But again, there's St. Augustine pops up. This is a lot of text. I'm not going to read it out, but I'll summarize it. In this, let's see, Fodderwing, the character, he is describing some Spaniards and talking about the Spanish who came to St. Augustine or to Florida in general, how he saw them in the scrub going back and forth and whatnot. And it comes up a lot in the main character. He talks about like just the idea of seeing Spaniards in like the woods comes up a lot in it. But also the Menorcans pop up in the book as well. They are spotted while they're out hunting. This again, it's a lot of text, go back and read the book. But they're in there. Penny then explains to young Jody who the Menorcans are, their history. They're out hunting gopher tortoises to make stew. I love gopher tortoises, so that hurts. But I get it. Florida's tough. Gotta eat what you can. But anyway, so again, more ties to St. Augustine before she actually moves here. But I bring up Yearling more importantly because the Yearling puts her on the map. She's living in Cross Creek full-time at that point, and she becomes famous. People drive down from all over to come spot this like famous author in her environment. So she needs a writer's retreat. She does not work well. She does not like being interrupted a lot while she's writing. So she finds herself, she has a little bit of money from the Pulitzer Prize. She finds herself a cottage on the beach. First, she starts renting it, but then she ends up falling in love. This little cottage is on Crescent Beach. It's seen here from the shore. It's up on a dune. It used to belong to one of the founders of Marineland. And when he owned it, he kept goats to keep the seagrasses and whatnot down, which I don't recommend. And so they called it Goat Hill. But Marjorie fell in love with it. She got a lot of work done within like the first month because by the end of the summer she bought it. So she must have really loved it. And she wrote letters. A lot of this I would recommend go read her letters. They are collected in several books. And she writes so much to all her friends and everyone. So she talks about how much she loved putting her name on the mailbox. And that was like a big moment for her. So this became her retreat. And she got a lot of writing done here. And she loved it, and she would go back and forth because it's only about 70-something miles between here and Cross Creek. So back then, a little bit of a drive. Today, not too bad. But yeah, so it was a great way for her to get away. But
I was wondering if she would buy a car.
yes, car. Yes, she was driving. She was a driver. Yeah. I've read many great accounts of her driving, and there's definitely that's a whole nother discussion. But she would bring all her pets with her. That I'll talk about. She would bring her pets back and forth with her often.
I assume that's not still there.
It is. It's still there.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a private residence today, but it still stands. I'll talk later, but it got expanded later on using money from the yearling again when she sold it to MGM, I believe, if I remember right, to make a movie. She used that money to help expand it because we'll get into it, but anyway, it's still there today. Anyway, well, when you buy a beach house, all your friends come through, right? Isn't that how that works? Well, that was what was kind of nice, is she already had some friends in St. Augustine. She had her, first, her long-time partner, Norton Baskin, came through. He was, they met after her divorce in the 1930s. He was managing a hotel in Ocala, and he just kind of stuck. She had quite a lot of suitors, but he just kind of stuck, and he would often come out, and they would entertain and have big parties. They loved playing bridge. He'd end up, we'll get into it, managing a lot of things in St. Augustine, and he'd end up staying in St. Augustine for the rest of his life, or at least the St. Augustine area. So I don't think he deserves his own discussion, so we're not going to talk too much about him. But anyway, she already had friends in St. Augustine. She was friends with Edith Pope, who was married to Pearl Pope. Edith, in her own right, it's hard to I could not find good photos of them, but that's Edith, that's Pearl. Pearl was in real estate. Edith was a writer herself. She introduced herself to Marjorie. She sent a letter really admiring her work, and they started a correspondence and were lifelong friends after that. And she'd end up becoming a pretty popular writer in her own time. She's not remembered as much today, but she was born and raised in St. Augustine. But they were lifelong friends with Norton and Marjorie, and that's them at one of her many, many parties. But
was it
anyway.
related to Margot? Okay. Sorry.
Good question.
I don't think.
Could be Alan.
Alan Poe is married to Margot Cox. Right, I know, but is Alan Poe?
I love that we're doing some
No,
genealogy.
they're not related.
Okay.
Oh, they were just asking if these popes were related to Margot Pope. Yeah, we were just doing a little genealogy. Anyway, and then in addition, their other good friends were Owen Young and Louise Young, who lived over in what is today now Washington Oaks. They built a house down there. He was Man of the Year on the Times, if that tells you. He was a really important person. He founded the RCA. He was a lawyer, a diplomat. He worked for GE. Anyway, so him and his wife would winter down at Washington Oaks, which was only a short drive to the south from their present beach house, and they would often play bridge and party together. A lot of dinner parties, But I just wanted to mention, these are a few people that'll pop up. She had way more people come through. This is only a few examples, so if I miss someone that you think I should have mentioned, I'm sorry, but they had a lot of friends that came through, but also friends they made here. So especially Norton, he made a lot of friends. A lot of people love him and still do. So anyway, here's a few more people who they were friends with, or Marjorie in particular loved James Branch Cabell. He was a fantasy novelist, and he used to winter here in St. Augustine, and she was a huge fan of his writing. And with her moving to the coast, they became friends and would continue to be friends. He would also end up dedicating several books that he said in St. Augustine or around St. Augustine. One was, hold on, I have it in here. I've never read it. This is when I learned about it myself. He wrote in 1946, There Were Two Pirates, which is, there's like a whole thing about a gemstone and the city gates and time travel. It's very interesting. It's about Gasparilla, and it goes in a direction I didn't expect, but anyway, it is dedicated to Marjorie. And then he wrote another follow-up book, which was set more in present day, which was 40s, that was dedicated to Norton Baskin because it revolved around the tourist industry. So anyway, just in case you're interested, that book is called The Devil's Own Dear Son, which it sounds intriguing. Anyway, they're on my to-read list, I admit. Anyway, but also Norman Berg, he's pretty famous. He was a salesman, but he did a lot of headhunting for another publishing company, but he came through a lot and was friends with Marjorie and one of her rejected suitors, but he kept coming through because he would often come to St. Augustine because at that time in the 30s and 40s, a lot of other authors were wintering in this area, so he would often be coming through. So Marjorie, that's probably part of the reason why Marjorie chose this area to have a beach house. She would, even though she said like she wanted to get away, she was close to a lot of people. And then of course her near and dear friend Julia Scribner came through a lot. I just had to mention her because she's very dear to Marjorie and she would come through a lot. But she's the daughter of Charles Scribner, her boss, and she became like a daughter to her, but they had many, many drunken nights at the beach, talking about life, boy problems, etc. So anyway, but I thought I would mention that. Anyway, okay, Norton Baskin back in. We're talking about 1941. So with the Marjorie lends Norton Baskin money. He's been a hotel man for years, many years. That's what brought him to Florida in general from Alabama, yeah. And so she decides to lend him money so he can buy Castle Gordon and turn it into a boutique hotel. And not a new concept, right? We see that every day. But he was ahead of the time and he was doing it in 1941. So she lends him $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah, 1941. Yeah, that's a lot of money. And they end up having a rift. It's like a little fight at that summer too. And she said, well, even if we're still not together, it's a good investment. So I was like, well, that's nice, but
Can you pay her back?
huh?
Can you pay her back?
I don't know. That's a good question. Anyway, well, they ended up married by October, so that rift ended really fast. They got married at the courthouse, the county courthouse, which is no longer downtown. It's pictured there. They actually got married. I forgot to write his name down, the name of the judge, but he married Zora Neale Hurston back in the 20s there as well. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so they got married, and in attendance, her aunt Ida, who was also living in the area, she was her aunt from her first marriage. She just kind of held on to her. Hey. And then also her friends Burl and Edith Pope were also there. They're not pictured in this picture, but if you see, they have other pictures at the Historical Society. They're like right there. Anyway, this is from the St. Augustine record. Yeah, so, yeah, I don't know if she got paid back. It's very interesting. I'm curious now. That's a great question. But anyway, when they were renovating it, they put in an apartment for them a penthouse for them to live in on top. And Marjorie really she was staying there, and she became more entrenched into St. Augustine. She thought, like, maybe she was very hopeful when she wrote this quote. I had thought and hoped that perhaps I had run dry the backwoods section and living, but there is something there from which I cannot seem to tear away. My husband is so completely lovely a person, and it grieves me to see him grieved. I simply have to clear out and go back to the grief. But she thought, actually, there is a whole new literary field before me in the old town of St. Augustine, and I really hope that in time I shall be able to sink myself into it. So, well, she still saw herself drawn back to the creek. Like, she would go back and forth. She'd go back to the creek. She'd come back to St. Augustine. She'd go to the Crescent Beach House. This is going to be a theme throughout their marriage. She's constantly on the move, but looking for a place to write. I don't blame her. But she really thought, like, maybe I can write something about St. Augustine. That never came to fruition. When she was here and being like the wife of the hotelier, she wasn't like, what's the best way? She was mingling with like the upper class of St. Augustine. Not the same way she was at the creek, where she was staying and living with crackers and all other kinds of lower class, working class people, land of the earth. So it was a very different, but she definitely saw, like, maybe there might be something here. I like that, and I wish we could have possibly gotten something, but we didn't, unfortunately. But anyway, so she's staying at the hotel, and guess what day it opened? It opened Pearl Harbor. Yeah, December 7th, 1941. So that was an ominous start to the hotel. It didn't have too good of a start, but once the Ponce de Leon started to take the Coast Guard, a lot of people would come and stay at their hotel who were visiting the Coast Guard men. And then also that became the place where everyone came to drink, who were like anyone of significance would come and drink and party there, or try to come get a glimpse of the famed author, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. So the hotel was doing good, and an area drew a bunch of writers. They had lots of dinner parties, had a lot of artists through, writers. But anyway, of them, one of the more famous stories, I'm pretty sure y'all have probably heard this. Oh yes, thank you. So speaking of all the people who came through the Castle Warden Hotel, Zora Neale Hurston is one of them. In 1942, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings goes to Florida Memorial College, which at that time was out of West Augustine, where the new Black History Museum is going. So she was teaching there that summer, and Marjorie was invited to give a talk, so she went over and talked, and she met Zora Neale Hurston, and they hit it off. They're both famous writers. Well, Zora not so much at that time, but they were both writers writing about Florida and the culture here. So they were very much kindred spirits. So she invited, naturally, like you do, your new friend, you invite them over. And so she invited Zora Neale Hurston over to the Castle Warden. Unfortunately, the Castle Warden was segregated. like the rest of the city. So she was really fretting. She's like, well, should I just call Hurston and tell her, oh, don't come, I'm sorry. But she really fretted, but Norton, he tells this story a bunch of times, like he is recorded telling this story, and it's slightly different. I've heard a lot of variation, they're just slightly different. But anyway, so the gist of it is, I've heard it either he's standing downstairs waiting for Hurston, or he has a black servant downstairs employee waiting for Hurston, that like kind of their idea was like, well, like, we'll catch her and pull her through the side and like have her go up like the employee entrance or whatever. And like they're waiting. And they're like, where is Hurston? She's not showing up. Where is she? And Norton decides to call up to the room. And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't think she's showing up. She had already slipped in through the side and was already up there. And I think, like, he paraphrases Hurston or Rawlings, and he's like, she was saying, we're sure something about having tea and having a lot of fun, and I should come up. I don't think they were having tea.
Long Island iced tea.
Probably. Anyway, this has been made into a play. We don't know what they talked about, but it started their friendship, and they would continue to write to each other for many years. But anyway, that happened. But this is Marjorie writing to Edith Pope. It was hard for her to write at Castle Warden. I simply associate Castle Warden with fun and cannot work there. Norton hangs his head like Topper, his dog, and looks very abused. And I feel as though the book were coming not out of my life's blood as usual, but out of his. Yeah, so she like escapes to go to Crescent Beach and to also the Creek to try to get more writing done. And shortly after she writes this, it's World War II, Norton volunteers to he ends up in India volunteering as an ambulance driver, and he's away. And she ends up helping manage the Castle Warden on top of everything else she's doing. And unfortunately, it does end up catching fire. And unfortunately, St. Augustine resident Ruth Pickering, their friend, was staying there, and she passed away in the fire. That was in 44. But anyway, moving on. In 42, she publishes Cross Creek Cookery. Wow, I misspelled that. Anyway, you see it here. You see where my brain was at. Food. Anyway, I bring this up because here's another mention of St. Augustine. There's different recipes in there from the Greek, some from her mother. It was very much inspired by her book that she had written before, Cross Creek. And apparently the food sounded so good in it, people were like, can you send us the recipes? So she wrote a cookbook. And in it, there are like St. Augustine deep fried shrimp. There's Donax broth. There's different St. Augustine recipes in it. So, I just bring it up because more St. Augustine. Anyway, so we're talking a lot about like she entertains a lot, not just at her house, not just at Castle Warden. In the 1940s, they'd also drive over to Marineland, and they would meet up with people. That was, if you're not aware, the world's first oceanarium. It was a lot bigger than what it is today, and they had restaurants and bars. The Dolphin Tavern and the Penguin Bar, to be fair, are the more notorious. Yeah.
The Dolphin Restaurant and the Moby Dick Lounge.
Moby Dick, thank you. But it was Penguin, right, first?
Penguin was a tavern.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks. See, I have my fact checker right here. Thank you. Anyway, but they would end up, Norton would end up managing them later on after World War II. But speaking of, again, more people coming through, friends coming through town, Ernest Hemingway, there's another famous story there, where he was there, he was stopped with one of his wives. Yeah, they were having drinks, she was there, I forget, with one of her editors, and they sent over a note, because she was like, I think that's Ernest Hemingway, they had met before, this isn't how they met, I've heard that told a lot, that's how they met and became friends. They had met in Bimini before, so, but that's been a minute, so. Anyway, she's there with her editor, they send over a note that she wants to buy Ernest Hemingway a drink. And he's like, unless you're Marjorie Rawlings, I'm not Ernest Hemingway. And they end up drinking, going back to her place and having one of their famous parties. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. So, and then they'll spend a lot of time there because Baskin will end up managing there. And anyway. So here's a timeline of a lot of stuff I've already discussed. We're gonna jump a little bit in time because right around, let's see, hold on, 1943. So that's when Norton ends up going to war. She also gets sued for an invasion of privacy by Zelma Kaysen over her book Cross Creek. She did not like how she was depicted. This ends up really dragging Marjorie down between her worried about Norton overseas, having this invasion of privacy lawsuit going on. She ends up, and then like the castle warning catches on fire, but she has a lot going on. She ends up buying a farmhouse in New York and starts spending a lot of time up there. So she's kind of all over the place, and really, there's not as much I have on her in St. Augustine until like towards basically the end of her life. So I just wanted to include this, kind of explain why we have a little bit of a time jump. But anyway, so in the 1950s, she has a couple of health problems. She has health problems her whole life. This isn't a new thing. She drinks heavy, she eats well, very well. Food is a very huge part of her life. It's one of her vanities that she'd like to talk about. But she ends up in the hospital several times, once in 1952, and then again in 1953. Unfortunately, in 1953, that's the time she passes away. She was at a card game with Owen and Louise Young. She was hanging out there. She's like, I don't feel well. So they go home. She's like, oh, I think I can drive back to the creek. Which, like, 70-something miles, you're not feeling great. That's a lot. So she goes back to the creek. She gets so bad that, like, she can't get out of bed. So her maid comes in the next day, calls Norton, who's still in St. Augustine area, and they get her an ambulance and they take her to Flagler Hospital, which I'm like, that's wild. From the creek to that's what I read. Anyway, so she ends up at Flagler Hospital where she passes away on December 14th, 1953, at the age of 57. They have services for her at Trinity Episcopal Church here in St. Augustine. And they'd end up driving her back to the Cross Creek area where she gets buried at Antioch Cemetery near Island Grove. And that's where she still is today. And here's some resources. I think I'm a little bit early, sorry. I went fast. I didn't have to explain as much, y'all knew a lot. Any questions?
She wrote several other books, but nobody paid the slightest attention to them. Were they considered crappy books, or was it just didn't catch the public mind, or what's the verdict on the other books?
That's a great question. That's kind of up to the reader to whether they're crappy. I'm sure someone liked them. they just did not catch the attention. I don't know if it's like her health declining and having so much on her mind that they just like weren't hitting right. Like she wasn't really, I know like the yearling was like, she was very concerned after the yearling that she didn't have anything else in her. And so like, I don't know if that reflects in her writing where she thinks mentally like, man, I don't have anything else. I have to say, or maybe, I don't know. That's a great question, but no, they really did not take off. I mean, it also helped that like Cross Creek and also the yearling and South Moon Under were like distributed to World War II soldiers.
Yes.
So that's a huge audience, an active audience right there. And that's where a lot of her popularity too came from, is a lot of soldiers reading it. And she was really big into writing them back. They would write her letters. And that's partly why she wrote Cross Creek Cookery in response. Any other questions? Yes.
On the timeline, you talked about when the movie came out, was that after she passed?
Oh, hold on, I got it here.
No, okay, so that's
No.
back in the 40s. Did she benefit from?
Oh, yes, yes, she's all right, she benefited, and they actually expanded her present beach house, which she then called like a mansion at that point. I think they added a few rooms. That was, Norton was living there at that point because he was managing at Marineland, and she needed space to write. She felt, yeah, they spent a lot of time apart in their marriage, but they were profuse letter writers. Like there's a whole, I recommend a whole book that's their letters back and forth, and you learn a lot about St. Augustine. She writes a lot about her political views, which I was like, I'm not mentioning those. She was, yeah, even though she wasn't living here full time, she was very interested in like the politics of St. Augustine as well as the state, and of course back home in Cross Creek as well. She had very strong feelings about things. Yeah, and she didn't, and she was not one to like sweeten it. Like she would just get it straight. She did a lot of straight talking. Yes.
I'm just curious where that, I moved down in Crescent Beach. Where is the house now? And I thought you were gonna go knock on the door.
Oh.
Just like to look at it and drive by.
You can find the address online. I don't like handing it out because it is a private residence,
Okay.
but it's still there. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Do you know what the result of the Supreme Court ruling was? Did she lose a lot of money or something?
She lost $1. Technically, like, I mean, lawyers aren't cheap. Her lawyer lived in Jacksonville. Anyway, yeah, so she won on the state level, if I remember correctly, but she lost, or no, she won on the local level, and then she lost on the state level. They ruled in favor of Zelma Cason, and that's why we have a lot of things now that say, like, disclosures, saying, like, we aren't talking about any person in particular. Yeah.
They did a play about it,
Oh, yes, and there's a play.
and the Limelight produced it, was it last year?
Yes,
And, that Michael Gannon,
it's very good, I recommend.
and they awarded her the dollars, you know, simply as a slap, because they had to award Zelma something.
Yeah, yeah, it's lasted 3 years, but yeah, it run on and it really tore up because Zelma was a friend of hers.
Very much.
Yeah, very close friend, so. I had another question over here.
Did you have any more background information on the ruling from the Supreme Court for the lady that felt she was?
Oh, there's loads. I recommend, just Google it, there's loads on that. It didn't have much to do with St. Augustine. I only use it as a way to describe her state of mind or where she was mentally. And yeah, there's lots of it online. It's a very famous case. It was published in all the papers. St. Augustine Record was publishing and following it. Everyone was gossiping about it. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
It's a little bit of an aside, but given her significance, maybe it's for the Historical Society, are they using her or that whole time period in the fight to help save Marineland is, is another argument about,
Yeah, I wish I knew more. That's a whole nother kettle of fish. Sorry, pun intended. I haven't heard it in the discussions. Like every blue moon, I see a Facebook post where they like bring up, oh, her, the creature, and everything else.
I mean,
But-
Ernest Hemingway, all the
Yeah,
writers
no,
at
I
that
agree.
time.
But a
the
lot of the
stories,
buildings that they were in are gone already. So
Right.
there's not much left that from their time,
Right.
unfortunately. But no, I agree. I unofficially agree.
At one time, Tom Basket, Norton's brother, was manager of the motel down there at Greenland at the same time, so
Yes.
they had ties there.
There's a book on Sally, Norton's niece, that's very good and also worth a read about her time growing up at Greenland. And she talks a lot about her aunt Marjorie, and how she used to take her all the time, because Marjorie never had children, and she used to take her to like teas, that were like mother-daughter teas and things like that.
The people that made that road to Greenland were the investors who come with C.D. Whitney and John Whitney and Olivia Arnett. They were very famous.
Yes.
She would have been famous people constantly.
Oh, yes.
All of the rumors from Palm Beach would be coming in.
Oh, absolutely. That was a good catch. No, she was friends with Margaret Mitchell also. So, like, she's very tied with Gone with the Wind.
The investors were the ones that did the first studio.
Yes. A lot of the investors that were from Marineland also, if you didn't catch that, also invested into the movie Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell, who was a friend of Marjorie, too. Any other questions? Yeah, Marineland's a fascinating history. You can learn, is that exhibit still up, Arvilla?
We will be putting it up again at the end of next year.
Yes.
And Suzanne's a former mayor.
Yeah.
And the current town clerk. I'm the town manager. I'm still associated with Green.
Are you?
Yeah.
So yes, the Historical Society does have a number of their underwater film objects in our collection, and we'll be putting those on display in late 26.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.